Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Modern Knights podcast. I'm your host, Luke Jones. With me is my tech guru,
Charles Alexander.
Niko is out again today, but it's all right. We love him anyways. He's a busy man. He's being productive, so it's all right.
Let him be a kid, Luke. Let him be a kid.
I'm letting him be a kid. While he still can. He's just about out of his kid years.
He's a high schooler.
I say that
Let him
like
be a high
I'm
schooler.
older than 30 years old. I'm like not even 25. So I say that like I have like a ton of years on him. I don't. I have maybe like 2 or 3.
I have more years on you than him.
Yep. You do. So, all right. Anywho, this episode is also once again sponsored by Devoted Plumbing. If you haven't heard about Devoted Plumbing yet, Devoted Plumbing is ran by my buddy Kyle Wayner. He is a good, honest dude. He does residential plumbing offset across the whole Kansas City area. He gives free quotes and estimates, meaning that he will not charge you $50, $80 to just come out, look at your plumbing problem, tell you what exactly the problem is, and then also charge you to tell you how much it's going to be to do the actual work. He'll show up, he'll diagnose the problem, and give you a quote all for free. And then he's also going to charge you a fair amount for the work done. He's not a massive operation, so he doesn't have some of those big extra fees that other companies do. So highly recommend him. And if you're a small business supporting person, then there you go. Even more reason to do it. Ironically, our topic for this episode has to do with plumbing. We're going to be talking about economics today. I know we tried to do an episode on this a while back, but kind of flunked out. We went off on like a tangent and ended up talking about economics for only the first like 5 minutes. So this is us jumping back in to finish up the Thinking Like a Christian that we had been going through. We took a big break from that, but we're finishing it up. After this, we're going to make an episode about history, and that's going to be the last one for the Thinking Like a Christian series. That's going to be over with. Wow. We've come a long way to finish that and to have so much other content that we put out.
Dude, we started with that.
Dude,
we started with testimonies and then starting off with Thinking Like a Christian.
It's hard. Like, it's hard for me to think that this has been going on since what, January?
Early stuff was the first 2 the first 3 we recorded in January, released it in the beginning of February.
Yeah, so we've been doing this for
5 months.
Wow, time's flown. It doesn't feel like it's been 5 months. I mean, honestly, it feels like we've been doing this like I'm just so used to it now that it feels like it's, never not happened. But to think of like, wow, this has been going on for like 5 months, like time's flown.
Yeah.
So,
but you want to know the other good thing though?
What's that?
We got 5 more months in front of us as well.
Yep, got 5 more in front of us, and then another 5 in front of that, and so on and so forth. As long as the Lord allows us to speak and do this, we'll keep going. So,
amen.
All right. Anywho, to get back into the episode, economics. What kind of economics does the Bible teach us? Well, the Bible teaches / promotes a free market enterprise, aka capitalism. Maybe not exactly like capitalism, but it's clearly seen that, for instance, private property is very much ingrained in the Bible. We see this clearly in the fact that one of the 10 commandments is you shall not steal. In order to steal from someone has to own something, which means private property is condoned in the Bible, right? I know there's some people who will go out and say that like the Bible supports communism. It doesn't, but typically their go-to scripture passage for that is in Acts when it talks about how the early church was like selling land and giving donating the money, putting it at the apostles' feet, and the apostles would distribute it to those who needed it. And they were living in a kind of communal way. They try to use that to make the argument like, see, that's exactly what communism is. A, no, it's not. B, what you see there is the apostles did not look at the early church and say, all right, go sell your property and then bring us the money so we can decide who gets it. It was people who voluntarily sold stuff that they had. It primarily says land, but there might have been other things, and then donated of their own free will and accord the money to the apostles and said, "Hey, use this to further the kingdom of God, to help the widows and the orphans and those sick and in need. You use this to be the hands and feet of Jesus to others." It was all voluntary, right? There was no higher up power going, "Hey, do this and then bring us the money." So it doesn't work. No, it does not support communism, nor was that communism at all.
On top of that, the very fact that it says "do not steal," adjoined with other stories. We can look at Abraham, we can look at Job, we can look at even the story of Joseph. There's so many stories on which people were blessed that served God. They were blessed because of their belief in how they used their time and efforts and money and income. Not like some of these big pastors you see on TVs that have 3 mansions, 7 jets, and a limousine that don't help that preach the prosperity gospel. That's not what I'm trying to say. These people in the Bible, they did God's work, and God rewarded them with what they were due.
Yeah, that points to Jesus' parable of the good tree and the bad tree. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Each tree is known by its fruit. What that means is, hey, you are what you do. I know that there's some people who I've interacted with before that say one thing, but then do something entirely different, and they don't seem to quite understand that just because you say something, that doesn't trump what your actions do. If you say that you're a very patient person, but in actuality you have a super short fuse, you're not a patient person. Doesn't matter how you describe yourself. It doesn't matter how generally if other people are describing you, they're probably going to be like, he says he has a long fuse, but it's a lot shorter than he thinks. But moral of the story being is that we are rewarded by our deeds, and the free market does that beautifully, because communism is obviously not a free market, and everything you do has to go to the government for the government to distribute to whoever they see fit, and they'll give each person as much as they see fit, and it's typically not enough, at least for the average Joe. But what a free market does is a free market encourages people, even if they're not like a good person at heart, or like, just in general, they'll oftentimes have good business practices, if for no other reason than so as to make money and put food on the table. Because the benefits of the free market is, for instance, if you run a pharmacy, right? In the free market, no one has to use your pharmacy. They choose to use your pharmacy. And if they get the slightest inclination that you have bad business practices or you don't have their best interests at heart, they're going to go find another pharmacist. And so even if you're a jerk who really couldn't give a flying rip about any of the people you see in a day, if for no other reason, you're going to act like a decent person solely so that you can survive and make money, whether it's a lot of money or whether it's enough money to put food on the table. You need that money. And so, the only way you're going to get it is if you treat people with care. And so you're going to have good business practices, because otherwise you're going to be broke and living off on the streets. So that's one benefit of the free market. Other benefit of the free market is you're often going to get people who are a lot more willing to help those around them than you are if they're forced to give up what they have all the freaking time to everyone else, because they know it's actually theirs and they get to give out of their own free will. And they also have more to give, like without fail, because the ownership of private property, for instance, if in places where there's like communal gardens and then private gardens. The private gardens always produce way more food than the communal gardens do, because the people who are growing food on the private gardens know that 100% of that food is going to their family. And sure, they might get some of the food from the communal garden, but it's not very likely that they're going to get enough to live off of throughout the year. So they're going to bust their butt to make sure that their garden produces as much food as possible, and then in their spare time, they'll go and help with the communal garden.
Yep. Ironic that you talk about a garden. There's this, going back to this podcast of old sermons I listened to, one of the big things with having a free market economy is that we are stewards of what we have. So one of my favorite sermons from the missionary, I'm going to probably butcher this, Otto Conning, and the title is The Pineapple Story. He was a missionary in the Philippines, and for the longest time he had this pineapple grove. The locals kept stealing from him over and over and over, and this was a big deal. I don't remember much about this because it's been a year since I've listened to it, but it's definitely a good one. I'd recommend it. I may have even sent that. That might be one of them I even sent to you, Luke. I don't
think you've sent that one, but I'll have to give it a listen sometime.
I'll send it to you. So, but going back to it, we are stewards of the things that are given to us. Take, for instance, a car. When you buy a car, you maintain that car. You put oil into it, you fill the tires, you put gas into it, you put money into it. Luke, any other ideas of other stewardship ideas of something you own?
I am reminded of, this isn't something that I own, but I know Phil Robertson has talked about, bouncing off the pineapple grove. He had people fishing his land for quite some time, and they were taking like a bunch of fish. It wasn't, really like hurting him, but from what it sounded like, but they were coming, like I think it was like some of the same people that kept coming like every single day, and he kept catching them. And at first he was like just getting them off his land and whatnot, but then he looked at what the Bible had to say about it, and read what Jesus said about loving your enemies. And so the next time he saw them, he got their attention and was like, hey, don't run, you're fine. You don't have to steal from me anymore. All right, if you want fish, I live just up the creek from here. Come to my house, knock on my door, and I will give you fish. If you want fish, if you want deer, basically, if you're hungry and you just need food, come and ask me and I will give you food.
Yep.
And that day, everyone stopped stealing from him. And if they needed something, they just went up to him and asked. So at the snap of a finger, he stopped everyone from stealing from him, because he privately owned all that stuff and was in the position to give it away and to love his enemies, to love his neighbors, to love those who were stealing from him. And he did so without demanding anything in return. He never said, you got to repay me for all the fish you've stolen from me over the years. Nothing. He just said, hey, you keep coming back here. You clearly need this for food. Just come and ask me and I will give it to you. I'll save you the work. If you want to fish, just come ask me.
Yep. There's scripture in, I didn't read this one to you, but Leviticus 19, 9 through verse 9 through 10. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest, and you shall not strip your vineyards bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God.
Yeah, that was actually like super common practice. And they would, I don't know. I wanted to say it's in the law for them to do this, but I know it's also common practice for them, as like they would harvest everything, and then when they tied it up in bundles, they would leave some of it on the ground, and they wouldn't tie up every last bit, so that the poor could come and gather, and because they were given that opportunity, they still did the work to get it. So it wasn't like they just did the whole work and then gave them bread, and incentivized them to just do nothing. They still had an incentive to work, but it was a guaranteed, hey, if you're not able to make money, if you work, you will, be able to eat still.
Yep.
Right. Is that golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But again, that's something that you can really only do with private property.
Yep.
Because if it's a whole communal deal, at some point you're going to have everyone not work. Right? Very few people are going to stay working and working diligently throughout the whole process. Because originally, everyone's going to start out. Professors have done all kinds of experiments with this in classrooms with kids who are like for communism and whatnot. They're like, I don't understand why we use capitalism instead of communism. Communism is so much better. And so they're like, oh, okay. Well, tell you what. Let's do an experiment. All right. We'll with the grades. From now on with test whatever we'll add up all the points and whatnot, and then we'll average it out to each person. Right. So the first test comes, and everyone else who would usually get like an A plus worked really hard, they got a B, right? But everyone else who never did the work or did very little work, instead of getting like a C or an F, they got a B. So for the people that didn't do any work, they're like, hey man, this is a pretty sweet deal. I like this. Do nothing, I'm winning. Yeah. But the people who were doing all the work and were the reasons that everyone got a B were like, what the crap is this? I put in all this work. I've been studying, pulling late all-nighters for the last like 2 weeks to study for this big final. And everyone else was going and partying and playing games and not studying. And now I get less, but they get more? Are you serious? And so what ended up happening was everyone just stopped putting in the work.
Over time.
And the entire class failed.
Yep. Yep.
That's exactly what happens with communism.
Was this a high school or college?
I think this particular one was college.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So communism never works.
Why would you do that in college though? Like,
because they were so sure it was going to work, and the professor was like, "All right, if you're so sure, let's put it let's put it into practice."
Yeah. That's failure's the greatest lesson.
Yep.
That pains me to hear it.
Oh yeah,
because
they lost money. They lost a lot of money. But at least they did it while they were young, so that they could, financially recover from it.
Yeah,
it would take a little bit longer, but at least
they'll recover.
It was early enough in life that they could, recover it.
That still kills me.
Yeah.
I'm
not in college, but that kind of hurts inside. The free market system not only encourages but enables people to be the best that they can be, right? You can't, going back to Phil Robertson, you can't just give food away, and if you live in a communist state, because you don't typically have enough food to feed your family.
Yep. Yep.
And the Bible talks about helping people with the excess that you have, right? It's kind of like the concept you can't help someone if you're dead.
Yeah.
If you're dead, trying to help someone, you're not going to be able to help them. You got to take care of yourself first, so that you're then in the position to be able to go and help other people. And you're really only able to get in that position via a free market in terms of economics.
Yeah, because you could easily boil that into every area.
Yeah.
Very easily.
Yeah. So I think the last time kind of what our problem was, of what made it so hard just to stay on point, is it wasn't just going to be a very long episode, and we were trying to like stretch it out so it was longer, but I think we're just going to leave it at that. I think that covered everything.
For this portion, yeah. For this half of the episode, yeah.
Yeah.
We have guardrails.
For the meat.
We also have employee and employer contracts.
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. Let's talk about that real quick. Because other thing about a free market is the government's not supposed to be involved in it.
Well, is they fair?
Most anything in our society that the government is involved in, they were not supposed to be involved in, like at all.
It's a hands-off economy.
Yes.
If you didn't sleep during civics class, you'd know that.
Yeah. part of the problem with the government being in everything is the government ruins everything it touches.
Absolute
power corrupts absolutely, and they right now they don't have absolute power, but compared to, well, in terms of the power they could have, but in terms of the power they had when we started off, they have absolute power, and it's corrupted absolutely.
Oh yeah. Just look at taxes.
Oh yeah. We started the Revolutionary War over a 2% tax on coffee. Just coffee, nothing else. Just coffee.
Was it coffee or tea? I thought it was tea.
It was so it started off with coffee. There were other taxes that were implemented, but it started off on a 2% tax. 2% tax on coffee was the spark it took. And we pay roughly 40% of our paycheck. And our entire paycheck, not a coffee tax, not a tea tax, our entire 40% of our paycheck goes to the government in taxes. So yeah, there's been some wrong decisions made. A lot of them over time. But some people might be saying like, well, if the government's not involved, how are we, going to have fair wages? How are we going to get, like cars, for instance, or planes? How are we going to know that they're being made up to safety standards? Well, first of all, we already know places like Boeing are saying screw you to safety standards, and so the government clearly is not helping there. But that's where contracts come in. We see in the parable of the man who owned the vineyard and went and hired out workers throughout the day. In Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 20. We see that the system of hiring was, hey, if you go do this work, I'll pay you this much. Do you agree to this? And the potential employee would, if he agreed to it, he'd say, yeah, I agree to that. So then he would go and do what was agreed to be done for the agreed amount of pay. And it was all done by contract. And if the contract was violated, then the law would get involved and enforce the contract. Otherwise, it was via that contract that you get good pay, good work conditions, and then you enforce things like safety standards by consumerism, which again, byproduct of the free market, is you get to choose who you buy from. If you have 3 different peanut butter companies and one of them does a great job doing peanut butter, the second one does a great job doing peanut butter, but then the third one makes a really crappy peanut butter and adds in all these additives and extra sugar, and it's just horrible for you. We have the choice to buy one of the other 2 peanut butters over the third peanut butter. And if the third peanut butter wants to make it, they're going to have to change their recipe and make their peanut butter better, whether it's, just healthier, tastier, whether it's it got leaked, they have horrible work conditions and pay horrible wages. Whatever it is, we can make change with who we give our money to. This is where the power of boycotting comes in, like people did with Bud Light and Target. Bud Light went from sponsoring Dylan Mulvaney to I think like last couple commercials, which has been a while ago, but the last couple commercials I've seen from it was like rodeo cowboy masculine dudes enjoying a Bud Light after a day on the trail or in the ring. And it's like, all right, why'd they do that? Because they were boycotted.
Yep.
They lost a ton of money because people would not buy from them because they knew if they did that they were, by extent, supporting the alphabet soup people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're after our kids, and we ain't fixing to do that because they're all delusional anyways. So.
Plus, there's tons of other, there's tons of better beverages than.
Oh, yeah. Than
Bud Light.
Than beer, alcohol, whatever.
But also I want to history moment with Chuckles here, because I didn't know this. Luke is correct on the coffee thing. The reason I was confused originally is because it's called the Tea Act of 1773. It was meant to bail out the British East Indian Company. Previously, the Townshend Revenue Act taxed a number of imported goods, including tea. The colonists, boycotted those goods and accordingly turned to drinking coffee instead of tea. They drink coffee instead of tea to protest. Man, that makes me want to keep drinking more coffee.
Yep. And that's a perfect example right there, because they didn't really have much in the way of a free market, because the government had its dirty, grimy fingers in the market. And you see that exactly through the fact that everything came through the East India Company, which, if I recall, was more or less a bureaucratic branch of the government.
Very much.
Which is also
corrupt.
why we don't need bureaucrats. And so with a free market, the government is not allowed to say, all right, we're going to tax all this stuff, and then you switch up so that you're not having to pay those taxes. They can't turn around and go like, oh, well, we'll just tax whatever it is you're getting then. In the free market, you are free to choose what you want to buy, when you buy it, who you buy it from, and where.
Exactly.
And the government has no say about it.
So then I'm not even going to pose you this question, Luke. How do we fix this?
How do we fix this? We get rid of the bureaucrats.
How? Because this is going to be our generation. This is the thing our generation's going to have to deal with. Gen Z and Gen Alpha and every generation that comes after us. We are the ones that are going to start. We're going to be the ones that are slowly creeping into government. Instead of focusing on climate change, we have to focus in-house. And this is one of those issues in-house we have to focus on. So how would you say to anybody listening to this that wants to go into politics, that wants to go into government, how do we change this?
The short and sweet version is we need Jesus. And a lot of people would look and be like, well, duh, thank you, Captain Obvious. But I'm like, no, seriously. I don't mean just to saying like, they need Jesus. I'm like, no, we need Jesus. We need to put him, we need to teach morality in our schools again from the Bible, like we used to do. I know I've said this before, and I know some people disagree with me on it. I think everything really started to go downhill, and I think it was also more so allowed to go downhill when I believe is 1962. I want to say it was in the summer of it.
It was 1962.
Yeah, the government took prayer and the Bible out of schools.
Yep.
You want to know what happened? It wasn't even like over the next couple of years. It was like super quickly. You want to know what started to happen?
Chaos.
Violent crime rose.
Mm-hmm.
Teen pregnancies skyrocketed.
Yep.
Violent crime skyrocketed. All the stuff you don't want to skyrocket in society skyrocketed. Previously, in like 40s and 50s, students' problems was chewing gum and talking during class. After the Bible got taken out of schools, rape and murder was the new trend.
Yep.
So our nation was founded on biblical principles. Benjamin Franklin said that, after they had decided what form of government America would have after we'd won the war, Benjamin Franklin was stopped by a woman in the street, and she asked him what kind of government they had created. And he looked at her and he said, a republic, if you can keep it, which means it takes active work to constantly preserve, meaning that if we don't work to preserve it, it's going to crumble, which means that we have to, again, to quote Benjamin Franklin, appease the divine providence that helped us to win the war against Great Britain, which was Jesus Christ. How do we do that? Teaching the Bible in schools. Louisiana making it the law of the state of Louisiana to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. That's a phenomenal start.
Oh yeah.
Put the 10 Commandments back in the classroom. I'm not exactly sure when this was or where, but I know that there was at one time a murder trial where the judge ordered the 10 Commandments to be taken off the wall because the 8th commandment, you shall not murder, might affect the ending of the trial.
Which is idiocy.
Yes. It's also evil to have a moral to have a moral code sitting there on the wall, and then to look at the moral code and say, yeah, that moral code says what this guy did is wrong, so let's take that down.
Yeah. We know where that judge stands.
Yes. So the short and sweet version is we need to bring God back into America. I'm also reminded, I can't recall which founding father said it, but one of our founding fathers said that, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote too, which isn't going to help at all.
I'll find it. I'm already going to put these quotes in the episode, so you're all good.
He said something along the lines of, our system of government was made for a moral society. And that's a huge reason why I say in 62 is when we really started to crumble, is because in 62 is when we stopped teaching morals.
Yep.
And when we lose our morals, we're no longer a moral society. And if our system of government only works for a moral society, which is meaning that we were free, the country was able to function without the government being ingrained in everything like it is now, because we were a moral society. We had a basic understanding of right and wrong that was heavily taught in every aspect of society.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's not. So now the government has to step in and play God, because we've shaken our fist at God and said, screw you, we know better, we don't need you.
Yep. Now I'm even going to throw this out. The cracks started in the 20s. We had small cracks before the Great Depression. And then throughout the ages, the crack got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you'd have to put your head in the sand not to see it.
Yeah. And you can look, it's probably going to be about impossible to pinpoint, like it was at this exact moment. This is when everything went down. So it probably,
you'd have to look at the culture of the United States.
Yeah. So, could we say it was exactly on, in 62 when God was kicked out of schools and thereby out of our, government and nation? Because Abraham Lincoln said the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next.
Yep. Which terrifies me for not even, I'd say, the second half of Gen Z, but especially for Gen Alpha, that have no defense to the crap they're putting in school.
Because all the parents have been sending their kids off to Caesar, and now they're coming back Romans, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, what the heck happened? And now we're actually waking up to like how, when, where, and why this is happening. Mm-hmm. And like, oh, Caesar's been hiding this from us.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, well,
no duh.
What did you expect to happen when you sent your kids to Caesar? But
yeah,
I digress.
Homeschooler.
Yeah. So to the short and sweet version of my answer is, we need to bring God back into America again. So, and honestly, I don't get emotional super often. Like, for instance, in movies, I'm not like a crier or anything, but to look back at the beginning of our country and to see how much we've degenerated and fallen, it genuinely breaks my heart.
Yep.
Because I look, the history is undeniable. Our founding fathers loved God. Our founding fathers loved righteousness, nobility, honor, integrity. And to look at everyone now, and what do we value? Degenerate psychopaths who dress up as something that they're not, who promise death to us if we don't let them go into the bathroom they feel like they should go into so that they can go rape kids or go rape fellow classmates who are of the opposite gender, or so that they can go rape cellmates in the women's prison, or to look and say, oh, these monsters who rape and then butcher women and butcher kids, who fight hiding behind their own wives and children because they're too much of a coward to stand and fight soldiers. And they're the good guys, right? According to society, but
according to the insane society, and to the people that are screaming the loudest, with what those same crazy people, because what they've done to Trump, they can do to us. They have woken the silent majority of the sane people. In the next year, I'm going to say in the next few months, we're going to see a shift occur because we're done. The good men and women of this country are done.
I, for one, am definitely done. I don't want war, but for the FBI, CIA, whoever's listening from the deep state, if you guys start a war,
or finishing it,
I believe, to quote, I'm wanting to say, it might not be Captain John Parker, but I'm wanting to say it was Captain John Parker during the shot heard around the world in Lexington. Do not fire unless fired upon. But if they want a war, let it start here. And we can see in the Bible that at some point, all the Christians are going to be driven to the hills. We're going to run and hide to stay alive. But whether I got to run and hide, I don't care. I will not abandon the one who refused to abandon me. I will not abandon the one who saved my soul. I will not sell you my soul. I would rather die. And if you kill me, I'm going to take as many of you with me as I possibly can. So whether that's Clinton's people or whoever it is that rules, I don't know, this dude's got 9 bullet holes in the back of his head. I don't know what happened, but must have been a suicide. Yeah, all those people, clearly you're good at what you do. So I'm not going to imagine for a second that I could take out a great multitude of you. But even if it's 1, if it's 2, if it's 3, if we get to a point where you're taking us Christians out, Jesus said, if you don't have a sword, go sell your cloak and buy one.
In the words of Dan Bongino, nicety time is over.
Again, do not fire unless fired upon. But if they want a war, let it start here. Meaning, I will not invoke violence. Or I will not start violence. I will not start a war. I will let you do that. But be careful, because if you do decide to start that, I will fight. And so will great many other people.
There's so many times you can get slapped and turn the other cheek.
But when it comes to the well-being of your neighbor, that is not the time.
No.
The Bible says that true love is to lay down one's life for one's friend. And I am more than willing to lay my life down for mine. So, and for those of you listening who are the good guys, are you willing to do the same? Because I don't know the timeline, but it would not surprise me if within recent coming times, we're going to have a war on our hands.
Even if it's a day war.
If it's a day, if it's years, make sure you know whose side that you're on, because it's going to come down eventually to a us versus them, good versus evil.
That's where that Armageddon.
Christ versus the Antichrist.
If that's the timeline we're on.
So, don't know when Jesus is coming back, but the signs are pointing to it. So, all right. Well, let's line things up a bit.
Because we got off on a really big tangent there.
Yep.
I did not mean to.
We tried to not do it, but here we are. We did it again.
But,
all right. So, our fact of the week. So, there's a monkey called a white-faced capuchin, I think. They greet each other. You ready for this? By sticking their fingers up each other's noses. Imagine me.
No.
Imagine
no.
Something new.
No.
Imagine like we just first met and I went, "Hi, my name's Luke. What's yours?" And I shoved my finger up your nose. I would get arrested and charged with assault if I did that.
Probably also the one time I'd slap you without fear. That'd be the one time I'd slap you without fear.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I recommend you do not greet your friends and family, or anyone for that matter.
Don't do it.
Like a white-faced capuchin. Maybe your brother or sister or someone that, beyond a shadow of a doubt would laugh it off.
Don't.
But
just
I recommend,
don't.
Period, just don't. It's probably a good rule of thumb to not do that. Anyway, moving on to our joke of the week.
Okay.
You said you got a doozy.
Oh, I got a doozy. If a cow doesn't produce milk, is it a milk dud or an utter failure?
See, at first I thought you misread that and it was supposed to be like a what do you call a cow that doesn't produce milk? And I was like, oh, utter failure, duh. But that was better.
It's been a while since I've had to catch myself laughing at a joke.
Is it a milk dud or an utter failure? Arguably, those are the same thing, though. If you, it's because, oh, that was funny. All right, I'm gonna pray us out. So, Lord, thank you for this day. I pray that we spoke your words, and I pray that everything that we said benefited those who heard, especially the tangent that we went off of. I pray, God, that you would raise up a new generation of believers that hates to be lukewarm, that loves you with all of its heart, soul, mind, and strength, and that viciously resists the enemy and submits to you. God, I pray that we would love that which is righteous and pure, good and noble and honorable. And I pray that we would hate that which is evil and that which you detest. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
That was easy.